So welcome everyone. My name is Jan Lehman. I'm the owner of CTC Productivity, and with me are my wonderful colleagues, Nancy Krushke, that many of you have seen in the webinars in the past. And then we want to introduce our new team member, Arnie House. Arnie actually comes from Southern Indiana, so we're kind of the Midwestern crew. I'm in Minnesota, Nancy's in Wisconsin, and Arnie's in Southern Indiana. So we're super excited to have Arnie on our team. And Arnie's actually going to be doing the topic today. So for those of you that may be new, there are a couple new names on the participant list. We've been doing these webinars for about 1.5 years. And if you're interested in seeing any of the past recordings, Nancy's going to put some links in the chat for you, and you can go out, and every webinar that we do, we record, and so it's out on our website. It's also out on YouTube, so you can go back and check those out later. And today we are actually going to be doing a topic on Microsoft List, which is a feature of SharePoint, and Arnie's going to be going through that one today. Typically the way we do this is we do a 20-minute deep dive, and then we open it up for Q&A. So for anybody that has a shorter lunch hour, you can kind of skedaddle and go, but still get the content. And so go ahead, Arnie, you can go to the next slide. Next month, we're going to be doing our favorite productivity hacks across the different tools within Microsoft 365. So in the links that Nancy just put in the chat, there's a place for you to register specifically for that webinar. There's also a place where you can sign up for our newsletter, and then anytime we have a new webinar coming out, you'll be notified. So that's a good way to stay in the loop. I'm going to touch on a couple quick things, like a little bit background information, and then pass it over to Arnie. So the world has really been evolving over the last, 10, 15 years, hard to know when it really started. But what's really happening is we're moving, according to Deloitte Consulting, we're moving from this traditional organizational structure in the red box into a social enterprise. And what that really means is we're really moving from being individual contributors working in more of a network of teams. And that's really why the Microsoft 365 environment was created, according to me. This is my opinion, but I think that's why it was created, because we need better tools than just email for communicating, collaborating, and all of that. And as we move into this more network of teams, there's a list of business issues that have become bigger and bigger that we're noticing. So organization of data is a really big challenge. Everybody has got disparate information and nobody knows where things are when you're working with other people. Communication, collaboration. I think everybody I know is drowning in emails. And we always say that email is often a symptom that there's a problem. It's not necessarily that email is the problem. So often people aren't using the right tools, like within Microsoft 365, to communicate and collaborate. And so email becomes this beast. Back-to-back meetings has definitely become the norm. Accountability is definitely a challenge as we work in this team environment, and then prioritization of projects and tasks. And so again, 365 really helps us in this area. 365 also is very helpful for us as we work in this very hybrid work environment now. Having all of our data and everything out in the cloud allows us to have great flexibility to work from home and then at the office the next day and work from the park if you need to. So really excited that it's helping support us in this post-pandemic world as well. Here's some stats about 365. There's lots of great stats out there, in particular from Forrester around the benefits. My favorite one here is, I think my two favorites are faster decision-making and then reduction in meetings. So those are huge productivity benefits that our clients are seeing from getting onto the 365 environment. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Arnie, and we're going to pause just for a minute. We're trying to have a clean break for cutting this out to go on their YouTube channel, but Arnie's going to take it away from here.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about eliminating information silos using Microsoft Lists. And one of the things that I've found notable over the years that I have worked with SharePoint and such is the time that employees spend every day searching and gathering information. According to McKinsey, they spend 1.8 hours every day searching, gathering information. I've seen a lot of studies on that. And it seems like around 19–20% is the number that keeps turning up. So that's a lot of time spent. And one thing I might note is it's not just the time that is spent looking and gathering information, it's the wear and tear on the gears of our mind. Anytime you're in a task and you're on a roll and you have to stop to go get something, even if you know where it's at, it wears you out mentally. Perhaps that's why so many of us need a nap about noon. And the reason there's so much time spent searching and gathering is the information is usually siloed in multiple locations or apps. Even if you know where it's at, it takes a while to get to it. You have to switch apps, you have to switch monitors, you have to go all over looking for the information. And 365 has really hit it out of the park in bringing that information together. Most notably with Teams, I like to say that if 365 is well designed, employees should rarely have to leave Teams. And toward the end, you'll see how we can roll SharePoint lists into Teams. So I mentioned SharePoint lists. One of the best things about lists is that it eliminates information silos, of course, reduces the time spent gathering information, but you'll notice on the left, there are two icons. The left one is SharePoint. It's been around since I think 2003. And on the right is Lists. Lists is a new app, and I think it's a brilliant move by Microsoft because lists have been kind of the unsung hero, just one of the best kept secrets of SharePoint. I've pushed lists pretty much since 2003, but most companies have not really leveraged lists, which is a real shame. And so what Microsoft did in the past year was, even though lists are a subset of SharePoint, and a major one at that, they have extracted that and made it its own app. So that might be a little confusing, but when you start using the Lists app, it's very intuitive, it's very mobile friendly, more so probably than even SharePoint. But it was just a wonderful move by Microsoft. So you're going to hear a lot more about Lists in the near future. So if you've been on these webinars recently, you've seen this drawing, and SharePoint and Lists are over on the right side, but we could even argue that lists are so much more than managing tasks. And that's a little confusing. That could be a webinar all its own, what to use when in task management. But SharePoint and Lists could arguably be put in all three of the boxes toward the right: the teamwork, the file storage and content sharing, and the task management. So what are lists? This is a snapshot of a list, an actual list being used, and it's pleasing to the eyes. It tells you what you need. It's highly customizable, but lists are actually browser-based spreadsheets. And there's a reason why in the early days of computing, spreadsheets were one of the first softwares invented. That's because businesses track information. So much business information is managed using rows and columns. So essentially, lists are browser-based spreadsheets. So why would you use lists? Number one, they're more versatile than Excel spreadsheets. Excel absolutely still has its place. If you want to do heavy duty analysis and pivot tables and do a lot of what ifs and such, Excel is a wonderful tool. Still a place for Excel. But if you're going to put your data somewhere that you want it to be very versatile and you can do so much more with it, definitely lists are the way to go. Lists simplify data entry and viewing for end users. Right? If you've ever built a spreadsheet for a group, sometimes especially if someone's not very savvy on the computer, there's some issues trying to get them to enter and manipulate data within that same spreadsheet. Not to mention the issues that arise when multiple people are wanting to use a spreadsheet at the same time. SharePoint lists can handle many users at one time. Lists reduce repetitive data filtering, sorting, and grouping. If you ever go into an Excel spreadsheet, I've found that if other people have been in there, it is rarely the way I want to look at it. So I have to switch tabs. I have to scroll down. I have to hide columns. I have to filter and sort and group. In SharePoint lists, if it's a way you prefer to see the data, you can build that view one time and it's always there for you. The permissions are highly customizable. You can set the permissions at the site level, at the list level, and to a certain extent, you can set the permissions on individual items. So it's hard to do that in Excel. And then once your data is in the list, there's a lot you can do with it on the back end. Live data can be displayed in many places. That can be done in Excel, but it's a lot clunkier. Okay, my computer's freezing up a little bit here. And it's mobile friendly for field employees. If you have employees that are not at a desk, Microsoft likes to call them deskless employees. If they've got a mobile device, they can interact with the office more easily. The information they need while they're out in the field is readily available, and it's not complicated for them. Another back-end functionality you can use is workflows. Power Automate is the new tool. It used to be called Flow, but once the information is in there, you can send notifications very specifically. You can send information to other apps. You can pull information from other apps to the list. And custom notifications have always been a powerful thing in SharePoint. Great thing about these notifications, you can tell it, I want immediate notification when an item is altered or entered. You can tell it, I want a daily summary or a weekly summary, so you can avoid some of that nuisance notifications. And here's a really slick one. If you work with Salesforce, QuickBooks, things such as that, you can connect to those apps. And of course, you can connect to all the other 365 apps as well. Now here's one that might hit home. Where might you use lists in your own business? You often track a lot of items, readings and logs, logging assets in and out, vacation requests. Oh, there was one that just slipped my mind. Customizable task tracking, and back to the point where you might wonder which of those tools in 365 to use for task tracking. That's probably a good choice for a future webinar. But if you have a formal project or you want to customize your task list more, Planner's great, recommended highly, but if you want to customize the task tracking, lists are the way to go. Recurring emails or status reports. If you, let's say, are a manager of 10 employees and you get a status report from each of them every Friday, you can eliminate 10 emails per week by using a list instead. And the great thing about that is it's all in one place. You see it on one web page, and you can group it by employee, group it by week, and it's much more researchable in the future. Whereas if those reports are an email, they're siloed. They're siloed in 10 emails per week times 52 weeks per year. That's 520 emails in a year. So in a list, it's all right there in front of you in one place. And finally, if you have spreadsheets with multiple authors or multiple viewers, definitely look at lists. So let's do a little list tour quickly. Now this is kind of a boring slide, but lists and libraries, which are what you see in here, these are the building blocks of this Freedom Farm SharePoint site. And here's one of those lists. It's a 90-day goal list. It's, again, pleasing to the eye. The little bars down the middle, the on track, off track, conditional formatting, you can do that with Excel. But again, you gain so much functionality by putting it in a list. And down the middle, you see view entries. If I were to click on those, you would see time-stamped status updates over time. But end users can easily view the data that's important to them. And I mentioned the views a while ago. If you look over to the right, the by department drop down, if you click on that, it brings up a menu of all the other views that were pre-built. And if there's any view in there that, or if there's not a view in there that meets your business needs, you can create a new view, or the administrator can create the new view. But that's, if you remember earlier, I said you go into an Excel sheet and you constantly have to move the stuff around so it makes sense to you. In SharePoint, you build one of these views and it's there for good. And end users just have to click the new button to add a new row in the spreadsheet or the list. And in an improvement, it pops the form up on top of the list rather than leaving the page. In the old with SharePoint, that was a little bit confusing to end users. So good improvement. And you can see there too, there's different types of data entry. So you can force correct data type from the field employees. And anywhere on the list, you can double click the item to open it, and it pops up the more detailed information about each row. And I keep talking about back-end functionality. One thing, you see the export to Excel there, you say, well, we're wanting to use lists, not Excel. Well, there's still a place for Excel, and let's say you want to archive or analyze more deeply, you could click that export button right there. Automate, you can set rules on the list to tell it to do certain things when conditions happen. The integrate, if you click down, you can integrate it with Power BI, Power Apps, or Power Automate. And you can still sign up for the good old SharePoint alerts. So this is all about busting silos and saving time looking and gathering information. So here's what you can do then more on the back end is put multiple lists on a single dashboard. The page you're looking at is what I call a dashboard. In SharePoint, they're just called pages. But there are 4 web parts on this page, and those are originating from 3 different lists. So we're bringing them all together on a single page.
Arnie, I'm going to interrupt real quick. So this is probably a bit overwhelming. It's always hard for us to know at what level we should come in. And so there's people who are probably like, what the heck is a SharePoint, right? And then there's SharePoint experts. And so as you're listening to this, feel free to start entering any questions you might have as we're on slides and screens. So, and know that you can watch the recording and kind of go back through. But it's just kind of hard to know what level we should be talking to with such a mixed audience. But
right, good point. So yeah, and SharePoint is just, if you don't currently use SharePoint, it is a collection of lists and libraries, as I said earlier, but it's actually just a web page building tool that makes things self-serve for employees. So, but yeah, that's in SharePoint, and you want your employees probably to use Teams if you're really breaking down silos. So pro tip number 2 is put that dashboard in Teams. So if you look at this screenshot, that's of course Teams, but right there is that exact same SharePoint page plopped right in there where the employees are working anyway, and they don't have to switch. So that's the ultimate silo buster, is to keep your employees in a single app, which in this case is Teams. And my last slide is, I mentioned lists versus SharePoint. Here's a screenshot of the desktop version of Microsoft Lists. And you can see across the top are those lists from the SharePoint site I just showed, the 4 on the left. And down farther, and I have favorited those, by the way, so they're always at the top. And then down below are all the other lists that I have looked at. But on a mobile phone, the list is the way to go. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jan.
Awesome. Nice job, Arnie. So let me just wrap up and then we'll open up for questions. So it looks like we have at least one question in there. Arnie, you might want to start looking at what's coming through on chat and go ahead and change the page here. So often when people stumble upon our videos in YouTube, they think all we do is Microsoft 365 stuff. So I'm going to talk about a couple other slides. We definitely do a lot around Microsoft 365. We do not get paid by Microsoft. We should, but we really look at it more from a process improvement standpoint. Typically, our work spends out because we do productivity-based work, and we spot the opportunity to leverage technology to drive productivity. So that's how we end up in the Microsoft space. But in addition to doing anything with process improvement and Microsoft 365, we also do a lot of one-on-one coaching. Arnie, go ahead and change the slide if you don't mind. Do a lot of one-on-one coaching, a lot of training, deeper dives in any of the topics around 365, plus anything about being an effective leader. So teaching people how to run effective meetings, effectively delegate, all those kind of things. We actually are ending up doing a lot of training right now on what we call project management for the everyday leader. Ironically, I spoke to a PMI, Project Management Institute group of people yesterday, and I found myself still teaching them some project management concepts and how to use 365. It was kind of interesting. So we all can learn about better project management, soft skills, as well as technical tools to use to help us. So. And I think, so again, Nancy entered the links again. She's so good. She just entered them. So feel free to sign up for that for the productivity hacks next time. And you also, again, can go back and look at past recordings and sign up for our newsletter. And at that point, we'll open it for Q&A. So Arnie, you had one question on there. Did you see that one from Ariel? I could just read it for you. So it says, could you also manipulate the data using Power BI if you wanted to develop KPIs from certain pieces of information that it tracks with the timestamps, like time to complete certain items? Does that make sense? If not, we can have you unmute and you could ask it again.
Yeah, I think I understand it. Yeah, in lists, you can build calculated fields that would, okay, like time to complete certain items. So yeah, you would calculate the time from start to finish, and then Power BI can certainly link right to that list.
And Power BI, for those of you who don't know it, is really just this amazing tool that takes anything and create fancy dashboards, quite honestly. It creates visual, so it's very easy to see your metrics and information. Any other questions? I think that was the only one that came through. Feel free to unmute yourself or enter into chat. So Arnie's actually working on a project right now for one of our clients that uses EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And that also, depending on the size of the company, we often build that in this list environment. So in a couple months out, we're going to be doing a webinar on how you'd use EOS in this environment for creating your dashboards and all the information you need, and to drill up and drill down on your rocks and all of that. So if that gives you an idea of where lists might also fit in.
Yeah, that's going to be really fun, because that's a big silo to where you can bring your goals, rocks, issues, and tasks all onto a single web page and keep them out in front.
All right, you guys are a quiet group today. So it doesn't have to be questions around lists, any questions around Microsoft 365. And if not, then we're good. If you were confused about anything Arnie talked about, that would not be unusual. Again, we don't know what level you guys are at in this conversation. So any other questions? All right. I think we're done then if there's no more. So thanks everybody for being here. We're going to hang on for a few more minutes. If you want to stick around and ask a question, that's fine. Arnie, go ahead and flip to the last slide. So Thanks very much. We hope to see you guys next month. And we're talking about productivity hacks within 365. Oh, are there questions? Oh, there's a question. Charlie's got a question. How do you get folders to remove from the trash folder? Oh, is that related to Outlook or something? Or
I'm assuming, Charlie, that's related to Outlook. Yeah, so you are exactly right. So when you send a folder to your Outlook trash, you have to manually go in there and delete it. So when you say empty my trash, it will empty all the email messages, but it will not delete the folders. So you have to do them one by one. Sorry, no other way.
Thanks. Perfect.
You have done it repeatedly and it still stays. In that case, I would talk to your IT company or your IT in-house if you have one, because that might mean that there's some synchronization issues going on. So you're deleting it in one space, but for some reason, when it syncs, it's bringing it back and not deleting it on the server, whether that's a server that's in-house or whether that's the Microsoft server. That typically is why they would stay.
Good answer, Nance. Perfect. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you in December.